Bez Hashem, in the coming weeks, we're going to speak more on the nuances and understanding in depth of the text of the Haggadah. Today, I would like to have a broader overview of the layout of the Seder of the Haggadah, and we're all familiar with it. Many of you have done it for quite a few times, more than I have. But when we have a different understanding of what the format is, then we understand it better what we're coming to do. As a way of bringing out the point, it is told about Rav Chaim Brisker. It's famous that he asked every year at his Seder, what's the difference between every single night of the year? We remember Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, and we mention it in the morning after, at the end of Shema. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. We remember that, and at night again. So, and on the night of the Seder, we have a mitzvah of also remembering that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim and speaking about it. We say both of them with our mouth, but what is the difference? Have any volunteers? There's probably all of you have an answer to this question. Rav Chaim narrowed into, he zeroed in and found three differences.
On Pesach, aren't we supposed to relive it as opposed to
Okay, very good. He said that on Pesach we're supposed to relive it. We're supposed to feel Chayav Adam Liras Esatzmai Kiluhu Yatsa Mitzrayim, as if he himself went out of Mitzrayim. So that's only on the Pesach night. Okay, good. This is good, and we'll see how the mitzvah itself brings us to that. So Rav Chaim said that number one, the Haggadah Sibor Yitzias Mitzrayim is derech she'ila v'tshuva, question answer, and we have the manishtana. The child asks, and then you respond. V'yigarat levincha v'yayim mahu. When the child asks, then you tell the child. Secondly, the second difference, he said, is that we're maskil b'genus u'misayim b'shevach, which means the Gemara says we start off with what happened in Mitzrayim and what was the decrees and what was the suffering and the hardships, the persecution that the Jewish people went through in Mitzrayim, and then we end off with the salvation from that. That's the second difference. Included in that, we could say that we're telling over the story at length, right? Which is the main difference that most of you would have said. Now we're telling over in detail the story at length. Kol amar v'lesaper arei zeh meshubach. The more you can include in that, the better. The third difference, which is interesting, it's a bit of a chiddush, but we know this from our Haggadah, is that we have special mitzvahs on Pesach, namely three: Pesach, Karban Pesach, matzah that we eat, and the maror. And these mitzvahs, we have to say, as the Haggadah tells us, that we have to say what the purpose of these mitzvahs are. And then we say, this which we eat, al shuma, what are we eating it for? And then we go ahead with the reason, and it's in the Haggadah. Okay, so basically question answer, that's the first difference. The second difference is that we're masl genus, Messiah b'shevach, we start with the hardships and then with the salvation. And thirdly, we have mitzvahs that we explain why we're doing them. Now, let's try to understand this more, and we'll speak about an overview of the Seder while we're talking. What is the reason behind and the significance of having questions being asked by the Seder, and the focus and importance that's attached to trying to inspire the children to ask questions? And we have the manishtana, and this is explained by Sfarim, numerous Sfarim. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz speaks about it in his Sichos Musar. Others speak. When a question is asked, that arouses an interest. That's a curiosity. It's a question.
It's engaging.
Yeah, it's engaging. It means that now there's a pursuit of knowledge, there's something that I want to know. I want to know more. And when a question is asked, and a person is looking for the answer, so then there's something fresh going on here. There's something new. There's hiskachus. And on the Leil HaSeder, we don't want that. It's stale. We're telling over the same story that we told over last year. We're telling over the same story that was told the year before and the year before, and that the kids learned about in school, and they already know. My Rosh Hashiva, the Tzal, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg in Baltimore, I think I heard on the tape from him, but he said that it's a special thing in Klal Yisrael that every year, at least in our generations, we see a new Haggadah comes out. You know how many Haggadahs there are? I don't know, is there more Haggadah Shel Pesach or more? Is that the one book that there's the most of?
Yeah.
That you didn't have the most Haggadah Shel Pesach. Every Rav, everyone writes their own. Well, that's good for us because it brings a hiskachus. It brings something new. We have a new insight, a new inspiration, a new understanding, and that's fresh. And when we have that, then it touches us on a different level, and that's very important. So that's the sheila b'tshuva. When we have the questions that are being asked, it's engaging, it's right, and that's something that the Mishnah and the Gemara in Pesachim, which discusses the Seder at length in the last parak of Pesachim, Arvei Pesachim, in the evening of Pesach. So in that Mishnah that speaks about the Manashtana, it says in the Gemara immediately following, and if his son is wise enough to ask the question, so he asks the question. And if he doesn't have a son there to ask him the question, so his wife asks him. And if he's by himself, so he asks himself the question. And this just shows us that there's something to this methodology. It's not just that we're trying, it's just not just for the kid, it's for even whoever we're telling the story to. Which is, I forgot to mention that part of Rav Chaim, that a big part of the difference is that we're telling it over to somebody. In other words, every night we don't have to have two people and there's a dialogue and there's telling over. This is Sipur, and the way of the Sipur to tell over to someone, if you have someone else to tell it over to, is Sheila B'Tshuva Manishtana.
Isn't the Sheila B'Tshuva, it's required by the Pasuk? There's a Pasuk. Ki yishalcha v'imcha v'yoymahu leimor. So we're by having it in the form of Sheila B'Tshuva, we're really complying with or mirroring the Pasuk, no?
Right, that is true. Very good. But what we see here is that even when you don't have a son there to tell over the story to, right? And even when the questions aren't forthcoming naturally, we still are looking for questions. We want that there should be a question here that we're answering. We want it to be done in such a way. But definitely the source is from the Pasuk. And I want to mention, since you brought this up, the basis on the Pasuk. I've seen this in previous years, and if you get your hands on the Malbim Haggadah, he has a beautiful piece there where he explains how the entire sequence of the Haggadah follows almost word for word the words in the Pasuk of Yigadat Talvincha B'Yaymahu Leimor Avorzeh and As Hashem Li B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim. He goes through each word how a sequence of the Haggadah, which otherwise doesn't seem to make so much sense, fits in to the Pasuk, in the sequence of the Pasuk. Malbim Haggadah. It's in English now. They have beautiful Malbim Haggadah in English. Okay. So anyway, to bring out this point even a little bit further, we find in the Ramban we once spoke about not too many weeks ago here that came to Yerushalayim. The Ramban wrote in his youth, his younger years, a sefer which is from the most penetrating, deep Sfarim on the Gemara that we have, called Milchemes Hashem. Now he wrote it to defend the position of the Rif against the Baal HaMa'or, Mizrahi HaLevi. Anyway, there was a big debate. This is a little bit off the topic, there's a big debate amongst the Rishonim and the Gaonim whether to make a bracha on every single one of the Arba Kosos, whether to make a bracha achrona afterwards, and there's difference in Ashkenazim and Sfardim. And what the Rib said is that we can't drink during the Haggadah, because so we can't drink anymore. So we have to make a new bracha when we get to the new cup. But anyway, the Baal HaMaor said, why not? Why can't you drink during the Haggadah? And the Ramban says over there that once you were moseg, we have wine that you don't have to be moseg, you don't have to dilute it and mix it. But in those days it was freshly mixed. I don't know if they do that in some countries nowadays still. But anyway, so once you were moseg the kais, once you diluted the cup of the second cup of wine after Kiddush, and then you went ahead and you started the mitzvah of the kos. And says Ramban, what's the mitzvah? You started asking, and you started darshaning. The Aram Yovid Avi in the parsha of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So then it's not appropriate to interrupt with drinking another cup. So, but what we see from the Ramban is that the mitzvah of the kos that we end off with the bracha of Asher Galanu, right at the end of Magid, that mitzvah starts already from Manishtana. And okay, that's as an aside. We pour the cup before the Manishtana. The Mishnah says, we say Kana ben Shayel. So, according to some opinions, really we're pouring the cup earlier than necessary in order to arouse the child to ask, hey, Daddy, every Shabbos, every Yom Tov we make Kiddush, then we wash. We don't make Kiddush twice. We don't drink another cup of wine before the meal. How come you're pouring another cup of wine? And then, Kana ben Shel, now the child asks and arouses the child's interest to ask that question, and then he comes to ask the other questions. But anyway, according to the Ramban, this is really the mitzvah of Sibor Yetzias Mitzrayim is starting right there with the Manishtana, with the question, Sheila V'Tshuva. Okay. You can see I never saw it before this year. I just happened to come across this past week. Interesting. The Sefer Aruch HaShulchan, he says that this doesn't fit with what I said till now. He says that the Manishtana is similar to questions that we find elsewhere, which is really not a question more as much as a expression of amazement and wonderment. How different! How amazingly different! How different is this night than every other night? Look at all the differences. Look at how special, how this table is set, and how we're doing all of these interesting things. And if you approach it that way, so it still does bring out the interest and the amazement, but
there's still the initial question, even by the Shulchan. Why is this night different? And then it's kind of answered in the other four questions.
Okay.
Is the point he's making.
There
still is that
There's
first
one question, and there are those who give this approach, by the way. I didn't mean to go into detail, but that there's really one question, and then the one question manifests itself in four different ways, or some say two ways, and maybe we'll get in more into that next time. Hopefully we'll have a text. Okay. But according to this amazement, astonishment way, so then even if the children already know the questions and they know perhaps the answers, but there's a wow, how amazing, and that could still fit in to our no, it's something that we struggle with. My children are just reaching this age, but people say, someone heard that I'm sitting around understanding the Haggadah. He said to me, I don't say pshatim on the Haggadah. I take the Haggadah Televincha approach, that that your child asks and you tell him about what happened. That's beautiful, and we tell over Sibor Yetzias Mitzrayim. We'll get more into that. But there is Haggadah that we do read, and we have a kais, and we read it, and it was prescribed for us, and there's a sense to it, and we want to understand what's the sequence and what's the setup.
When was it prescribed?
Okay, we have to get back to you historically.
Speaking,
right.
Who do we attribute the Haggadah to?
Right. I don't know if we know exactly who wrote it, but
or a period. Is it a Gaonic period?
I think it's definitely from that time already, but we see. So we have the Rosh Kollel have an answer to this question, and the Rambam has his Seder. What's the earliest source of the Haggadah Shel Pesach, of the format that we have? The Rishonim, the Rambam, has his Haggadah in Hilchos Pesach. He tells you the Seder of the Haggadah. Sefer Chinuch brings it also, Rishonim, but I don't know what earlier than the Rambam. Definitely was from the times of the Gaonim. Right, definitely there are certain parts of it.
Some attribute it to Yehuda Nasi. The original. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, this is bold for me to say this week, but next week, if you could bring your own questions, and we could have, instead of bring the children here to ask the questions, bring the adults to ask the questions, and we'll try to come up with some answers. Have another week to look into this more, such questions as in other words, who is it attributed to, and other questions that are perplexing questions, and we could try to get to them. Okay, let's speak about the next point, that we start with the decrees, we start with the hardships and the suffering, the back-breaking labor. We start with the Gnus, negative, Messiah b'Shevach, with the praise. What is the idea behind this? Why don't we just go straight to the salvation? Why we focus on what the mitzvah did to us? Okay, the answer is pretty simple here, but let's try to bring this up.
Contrast?
That's exactly what I wanted to say. The contrast. When you see something, he has some great answers here. He's going to lead a great
That's
statement.
why he's sitting there.
When you see something and you see the contrast, then you understand it. If you see a train, I once saw this mashal, maybe Rabbi Kaplan says this mashal, I don't remember. You see a train, this very long train, and it's going. Then it ends. So now you see, before that was a train, and this is not. There's no train here anymore. But in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a large problem with us seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that there's no contrast, because Hashem is everywhere. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always is. He always exists. So we can't say there's no before and after. But so anyway, getting back to the point of contrast, bringing out clarity. There's another point as well between this contrast, and that is the appreciation. When a person knows that if it wasn't for so-and-so, I still wouldn't have a job, I wouldn't have a parnasa, right? I would have never gotten my education, I wouldn't be where I am today, I wouldn't have, without this and this doctor helping me through this difficult situation, or this and this. We could go on, but the point is that the contrast brings out the Hakaras HaTov. And when a person focuses on how grave the situation was beforehand, and how difficult, how dire the way the Jewish people were suffering, and how each day was darker than the next, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us from that. So when that will bring out the appreciation, and we'll explain this a little bit more in a minute. But the Gemara has two Mandarim, Rav and Shmuel, from the earliest Amiroyim, and the Rav and Shmuel, they both they had a machlokes. How do you start the Gnus of Messiah b'Shevach? Some of you are familiar with this. Shmuel said, I could be mixing up, I think Shmuel said that we start with Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves to Paro and Mitzrayim, and then Vayaytzienu Hashem Misham, and Hashem took us out. That's the Maskal B'Genos, the slavery in Egypt and the salvation. That's Shmuel's approach. Rav says that we start with Mitchila Oivdei Avodah Zarah Hayu Avosenu. That before Abraham Avinu, when it was Terach his father, and those before him, before there was a time when we were misguided, we were misled, we didn't know what the purpose of life was, and we were idol worshippers, until Hashem brought Avraham Avinu closer to him, and Yitzchak and Yaakov, and finally he gave us the Torah and stood us up on the Derech HaEmes. And that's the approach of Rav. Which way do we do? Both.
Yeah.
It's both. Now, just a question I want to raise. Well, we could think about this and look into it more. I don't have the answer right now. Is that the way we actually do it seems to be in the sequence of things a little bit out of order, because what happened first was Mitchila Oivdei Avodah Zarah Hayu Avosenu, from times of Terach, right? But what we start with is Avadim Hayinu, and then we go back later on to Mitchila Oivdei Avodah Zarah.
Could you say that you go from physical slavery to spiritual slavery in a way?
Okay, it could be. This is an answer. The physical slavery, why would we start with that?
That's a lower level of slavery.
And then the spiritual was even greater.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting.
What was the
machlokas Rav and Shmuel here? To understand better. What was the machlokas Rav and Shmuel? And again, I'm giving a broader overview. So
whether you're discussing a specific event or a context in history.
So which one is the entirety?
The entirety is
Aram Yavid Avi.
Go all the way back, or is it specifically to Mitzrayim
and just start from there. Just
or
from.
Is it a complete nation building experience all the way from the first generation?
All the way from Aram Yavid Avi. Okay, so it starts earlier, and then it ends. It could be even later with Matan Torah.
Right.
It could be according to Rav. There's another aspect which was brought up also, which is the spiritual subjugation and the physical. What were you saying?
I think that we sat down at the dinner because of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the Aseret Dibros starts there. It doesn't start with creation. Right? There's an idea that this is the seminal moment. Right? So if you're going to get people's attention, that's where you're going to start. You may then go back and weave other things into it.
Very good. I see there's going to be a number of different styles Siddharim here. I have a feeling if we went into each person's home, each one would be a bit different, or maybe a lot different.
There's no gnus in being a slave. There's much more gnus in being an idolater. Being an idolater is a choice you've made. Being a slave is something which has been forced on you. And I have a bit of difficulty seeing in being meshubah to Paro as being a gnus.
Right. Okay. So, gnus would be something that would be embarrassing, right? Like something that would be humiliating. And you're saying that's it's not your choice.
Yeah.
It's not your choice. So then, why would that be a gnus?
Being a slave constantly feels humiliating.
Huh?
And slavery is a humiliation.
But in retrospect, at the time, for sure, it's humiliating. But in retrospect, generations ago we were slaves. That doesn't reflect on me. That doesn't reflect on my moral quality. It reflects on the fact that someone else was stronger than me, or stronger than my ancestors, and enslaved us. It doesn't mean say I'm a bad person or I'm morally deficient.
But we obviously did something
to warrant merit it.
Yeah.
Merit it.
That's possible.
Seems not. It seems that it was a promise that God fulfilled. Actually, that's a whole other issue.
Yes, this is something I want to discuss.
How did we get there?
At another point, this is a very fundamental point that we have to understand. There are numerous answers, but there's something that we have to understand for ourselves, and the children may ask this question, and that is, what was the necessity and what did Klal Yisrael need to have Shibud Mitzrayim for, and was there something positive that came out of this? Did we do something to deserve it, and was it something that we needed? And this is a fundamental question, okay? Because Hashem saved us from it, but this was clearly a gezerah that came from Shemayim. And when Yaakov Avinu went down, he had a nevuah, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu told him, don't try to get out of this one. This is a gezerah from Shemayim. They're going down from Mitzrayim.
Yeah, it's clear. It was clear as day. This is going to happen.
But was there an aspect of the nature of the slavery, and how bad did it have to be, and how long did it have to be, and I mean...
that's the question of the punishment for Paro.
Right. There was a certain number of years. Right.
Well, even how much did we hold on to our relationship?
Besides the issue of Paro and the Mitzvah getting punished, it's a different question. But for our purposes, what was the benefit, or what was the need that we needed to have Mitzrayim? I don't want answers for this right now. This is a good question to think about. This question, it's an important question to think about. And if we have 7 days of Pesach, Baruch Hashem, going to go if you have 8 days, and we're not going to have the time during the Seder necessarily to ask all the questions and give all the answers.
It was difficult on the Seder night to shut down the kids and say we'll deal with it later, and then we have to move on.
Yeah, there's always a struggle. I'm going to be by my in-laws in Atlanta this year. It's been a few years since I've been by them, but so I remember that there's always the struggle. At some point, my father-in-law says, okay, we're going to move on now. We're going to get up to the main part of the Haggadah when we darshan the psukim of Aram Yoived Avi, and that's really the main part. So we're going to go through this next part a little bit quicker, and then all of a sudden you hear my mother-in-law saying, I have a question on the previous paragraph that we finished. And then she slows things down. Anyway.
Are they going to be watching this video?
You can edit, can't you?
Nah. I'm good.
Okay. But anyway, it doesn't always run the way things do. I just want to give an aside before we continue with getting up to the Hallel and the Brachot. There's so much to accomplish on the Seder night. And we prepare, as Hashem, whether it's on the Shabbos Haggadah, and these weeks coming up, we sit down, we prepare, we think over what it is that we want to accomplish, the message, quality versus quantity. And what there's going to be something memorable and that's going to come out. But there is a big pressure on this night, and we have to, as the father of the household, have to try to I don't know, put a pin in to burst the bubble of pressure here, because it's not good. It's not a good atmosphere for absorption of a lesson or of joy and gratitude, to have a high pressure situation, that we have a time constraint here, we have to get through this, we have to rush, and we have to make sure that everything goes perfectly, and that nobody misbehaves, and that everyone sits perfectly in their chair, and there could be, the pressure could make things totally backfire, and we just have to keep that in mind, that sometimes, rather than everything running exactly on course, we just have to keep the general course.
It's a meaningful experience.
Right, well, it's a meaningful experience. I read this, I don't know too much about being a pilot, but I read that every pilot has a mapped out exactly route that he's going to take, and no pilot follows it exactly.
Yeah.
They just try to stay on it, and they go up a little bit because of turbulence or winds or whatever. They stay as close as they can to that. So we can't, and it's the same thing with Chinuch Habanim in general. You don't know, every situation comes up, and you didn't write the book before it happens. The challenges are we're going to have to react to them as they come up.
Go make sure a Seder isn't a crash line.
Well, I mean, even were we meant to be there 400 years or 210, even Hashem sort of changed
Okay.
Of course, perhaps, if
That's
you
right.
understand that it's being...
Where do the 410 years? Where do the 400 years start from? And when do the 210 years start from? Did Hashem speed it up? Was it supposed to happen then? And there's so many questions. Baruch Hashem, there's a wealth of questions, and these questions are good for every Shabbos table, but for the Seder, for Pesach, to encourage people to bring their questions and have a discussion. Okay, now I want to get into another aspect, a theme over here. I lost track of time.
It's pin 18.
Can I give my friends a hint, a way to save 20 minutes on the Seder?
Yes, go ahead.
The miraculous thing. Taught to me by Rabbi Breitowitz. How to save 20 minutes in your Seder. Very simple. Place cards. People spend 20 minutes sitting down.
Yeah.
If you plan it ahead of time, you can save 20 minutes of really what is wasted time in the Seder.
That's where you're really not
Place
supposed
cards.
to delay. It's the
Place
start,
cards.
right? I mean, you really have to start.
Just a hint.
Okay, very good.
It's my tip for the year.
We did that before too.
Huge difference.
If you have little kids, so maybe you want to glue down the place cards.
Yeah, they carry them around.
And they're not the little kids.
Wherever they sit, they go.
Okay, we're getting to the Hallel. The Hallel is very interestingly split up into two parts during the Seder. The first half, and before that is on the second cup of wine, precedes the mitzvahs of the matzah and the maror and the Suda of Shulchan Aruch. And then the second half is after. Let's speak about the first half. So we see that the Hallel, is grouped together with Magid, and it's on the same cup as Magid. And what is this Hallel that we have of this night? We speak about B'tzeis Yisrael Mitzrayim, right? That's one of the first paragraph, Hallel B'tzeis Mitzrayim, and we sing praises to Hashem, Shevach v'Haidah T'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's preceded directly with a famous halacha, which was quoted here before, that Chayev Kol Adam L'Rois Es Atzmai Kiluhu Kiluhu Atzmai Yatza MiMitzrayim. Okay, and of course a pasuk, but a person has to see himself as if he himself left Mitzrayim. And this is something which is an emotion, it's a feeling, it's something that reverberates in a person. And I believe that this is part of the reason why we need the Maskal B'Gnos Messiah B'Shevach. Because if you want to feel emotionally the salvation, then you need to feel a little bit of the bitterness and the pain. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the Torah, has given us mitzvahs which are tangible, that bring out these the feelings of the bitterness, the maror, and the matzah, whether it's the bread of affliction. This is a very good question. What's the matzah? Is it the bread of chayros? Is it the bread of affliction? And the carbon Pesach, we have the heseba, the leaning, the 4 cups of wine. That's kederach b'nei chorin, like kings. And this is all actions that we're doing. You can call it visual aid. You can call it, actual physical involvement. But these are things which are adding to the air of we are seeing that we're going out of Mitzrayim. And when we feel the hardship and close our eyes and feel and think, and use our imagination, then that could bring it out. I get emotional sometimes. I get it from my father, and I remember one time I saw an idea in Haggadah, and the idea was, it was pretty short in Haggadah, but the idea was, take a child, a character, call him Don, call him whatever you want to call him, David, and he's in Mitzrayim, and on a child's level, you don't want to make it too scary because you don't want the kid to have nightmares, but on a child's level, tell the story of David and what it was like and the hardships that his family went through, and his daddy suffered, and his mommy suffered, and his sister worked, and he worked, and the children had to do child labor, and how they were hungry, and so on, and then how they were saved. Then all of a sudden it becomes a different story, a different reality. The story of this little boy named Don or David or whatever. And I got very emotional as I was telling my son. Actually, right before this, there's a special story, and I had my wife tell me on the phone to read to me again the story that I could remember it. Maybe I'll share it in a minute, but let's just get through this. I couldn't. I was just crying on the phone listening to the story. I could read a fiction and start crying in the middle. Anyway, but when a child sees that the parent gets excited and the parent gets emotional, and then that's memorable for a child. And I remember vividly that one Pesach my father saying he couldn't compose himself, and it was by B'chol Dar V'Dar Oimdim Aleinu L'Chaleseinu that the nations rise up against us in every generation to try to annihilate us, and he started crying and he couldn't compose himself, and then when he got himself back together he said one day my children will say they saw their father crying real tears by the Pesach Seder. So when I tell the story later I won't be able to. Anyway, so this is becoming memorable for our kid. And what a person gets excited about, and you can see that when a person's holding up the kos by the bracha then and the hallel, and they're singing with the excitement, and they're saying, they're not just, okay, everyone's hungry, let's rush through this. Let's tell everyone that getting to the Shevach Vaydah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a real emotional feeling of we ourselves were taken out of Mitzrayim, and how and why should we feel that way? We could discuss, but when we got to this feeling, then we Hakaras Hatov and Shevach Vaydah, then that's what brings us, and it's in one mesh with the Hallel, with the singing the cup. We pick up the cup and Shira Alakais, singing Shira Alakais, and according to some opinions, even the Haggadah is a form of Shira Alakais. I saw about B'Shem the Shiboli Haleket, that the same way that on Purim we don't say Hallel, but we say that the Gemara says, according to one pshat, that what is the Hallel on Purim? It's reading the Megillah, reading the story of the Yetzias Mitzrayim itself is a form of Shevach Vaydah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's not just telling over it's emunah. It's getting to seeing, that it's not just that we know Hashem took us out, but that we have a Masorah of all the details, and it's been told over the entire story. But also that it's a Shevach Vaydah HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, if I could, okay, we're getting to the close over here.
Some say the Suda itself is part of the Mahal.
The Suda itself is part of the house, so it's broken in the middle. Very nice.
It is itself intended to be a praise of God.
The Suda definitely is, and the whole way the table is set up is a way of Cheirot, and a way of Kibnei Chorin, and like kings, and it's something which itself lends to the whole aura of this feeling like Hashem took us out and He made us into special, uplifted Asarim, Malachim, Mamleches Kayanim, V'Gai Kadosh that Hashem made us. At the end of the Pesach Seder, sometimes people are a little bit tipsy from the third cup, fourth cup,
fifth cup.
Anyway, I saw this in my own family. Then when I was zochet to be by my Rosh Hashiva of Nosson Tzvi Finkel in the mirror by his Pesach Seder, I saw that this was something that wasn't only by my parents' Seder and by my aunt and uncle's Seder, but the end of the Seder, and some families, there's a little bit of a good time is had. And it's a little bit of a lighter atmosphere where people people enjoy themselves and everyone sings together, and there's an air of enjoyment. And this is also, I think, part of it. We come to a joy of Hashem took us out, and we're so overjoyed. And really, at the end of the Seder, is very deep meanings to the Haggadah and to the other, to the end of the Hallel is a la'asid lavo of the future redemption of the Jewish people. And the Hallel is broken into two. One is singing Shira of the past, and one is the emunah of the destiny of the Jewish people of the future Geula. But I want to end with a story. Maybe I'm going over time with the story. This is the story. There was a boy, call him Shimon Silver, and he was sitting by his Pesach Seder, and his father picked up the shiny Kiddush cup to say Kiddush, and his father said, "What are we up to?" And everyone said, "Kaddish." And he said, "When are we getting up to Vanitzak?" And his father looked at him and said, "Why Vanitzak?" He said, when we say Vanitzak in Haggadah. So his father said, "Do you mean when it says in the pasuk that the Jewish people cried out to Hashem and Hashem heard their cries?" And he said, "Yes, that's it, Vanitzak." So his father said, "We're going to get there towards the end of Magid. I'll let you know when we get there." And then he makes Kiddush, and they have they go to the Karpas, and they have the Manishtana, and the Yachatz, and his father says, "Magid," and Shimon says, "Abba, are we up to Vanitzak?" And he says, not yet. We're getting there." And as they continue, again the child asks if they're up to this part of the Haggadah yet. And his mother says, "Shimon, why do you want so badly to get up to Vanitzak?" And so he said, "It's because of a story that I heard that my Rabbi told me in Cheder." So his mother said, "Could you share the story with us?" So this is the story. It happened. This story is like a couple 100 years old. There was a Jew. He had an inn, and he served drinks to the local residents, and that's how he made his parnasa. And he paid rent to the parrots. And at the end of the winter, the parrots would come and collect his rent, 150 gold coins. And one winter, the end of the winter came, and Moshe, the innkeeper, he didn't have the 150 gold coins to pay, because this year was very snowy, and people didn't come out much, and they didn't come to his inn to purchase drinks. He didn't make enough money to pay the parrots this year. And as the time is approaching, and he's in a panic, what am I going to do? I'm going to get kicked out. I'm going to lose my parnasa. What's going to happen? The parrots will beat me. So he decides to go visit his Rebbe. And I forgot the name of the Rebbe. I'm sorry. Maybe I could remember next time. He went, and he said, "Rebbe, what should I do? The parrot he's going to demand his money. I'm not going to have it." The Rebbe said, "How long do you have?" He said, "I have a few more weeks." He said, "Daven to Hashem, the kach of tefillah helps. Cry out to Hashem." And I want to tell you, special time to cry out. Soon is going to be the Pesach Seder. And you're going to get up to Vanitzak, and you're going to read how the Jewish people cried out in Mitzrayim, and how Hashem answered their tefillahs. At that time, stop and ask everyone in your Seder. They know the tzara that you're going through. Say, we're going to pause for a moment, and we're all going to say a silent prayer that Hashem should save us. And they get up to Vanitzak. Moshe, he closes his eyes, and he starts crying, and he's pouring out his heart to Hashem. And everyone at the table, they hear a knock on the door. somebody comes to the door, and he's holding a big bag of money in his hand, and he says, I'm running away from, I forgot who he said, and I have my bag, 300 gold coins, this is my money, and I need somebody that I could trust to save it. I'm leaving it in your house, and you're the only one I could trust, and keep it from me till I come back. And because of reward for you for saving, for holding it for me safely, you can keep 150 gold coins. They felt HaKadosh Baruch Hu just saved them. They continued the Seder with the feeling of upliftedness and joy and singing. Amazing. Their own personal Yeshua. When the boy said this, Shimon, his mother, I don't know if you can do it.
They had some money on Pesach.
His mother, who was very sick, who had she got dressed to come to the Pesach Seder even though she didn't feel like it. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so she understood what Shimon was feeling. Her family knew that she was sick, and her family knew that they needed Yeshua.
Deep breath.
He's a doctor? And everyone closed their eyes and they started crying. First the mother, and then everyone started crying, and they cried out at Hashem. And after Pesach, the mother went to the doctor. I guess I'm not meant to perform on stage. And she saw that there was improvement, and then they would test, and the thing started to progress. And then after some time, she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "What happened? Why did everything turn around?" So, anyway, this is a special time by Nitzach. And Jewish people were saved through tefillah, that we cried out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's a special night where we could transcend, so to speak. HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted us up and suddenly revealed himself to us. And even if we're not on the Madrega the whole year, to be elevated, we put on our kittel, and we have the Pesach Seder, and we're elevated to a time when we could come close to Hashem and sing Shira from the depths of our heart.
By the way, part of the lesson is you should pay very careful attention to your child at the Seder.
Yes, to focus on the child.
The child who was concerned about this story.
This I got to see from our Shiva how he focused on this. It was his grandchild, but focus on the children and make it something that they could identify with. I apologize for getting too emotional, breaking up the whole story. And anyway, Yasher Koyach. Next time, Bez Hashem, we'll go more in depth to the analyzing the text of the Haggadah, and would like to focus on actually how to tell over Yetzias Mitzrayim. We spoke about it a little bit today. Yasher Koyach.